So please welcome Vijay Kumar.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here among all sort of innovators in this room, right? Innovators with information. I'm going to sort of give you a slightly different perspective compared to some of the things that was already talked about here about interface and user experience for software and things like that. I'm going to take a slightly broader approach. I may not even talk about, use those words like usability and information architecture and things like that. I'm trying to take a slightly higher level approach to look at innovation in general. So be with me in that mindset. Okay. We can look at the world today. We can describe the world today as something like this is a wonderful world of innovations we enjoy, right? We are surrounded with all kinds of innovations that are based on technology, right? These days we talk about cloud computing, cloud of clouds, ubiquitous computing, Internet of Things, and we are in the midst of those wonderful things, right? That's one way to look at the world. But imagine the other side of the coin, right? Another perspective to look at the world is through this lens, right? We are in the middle of wonderful global experiences, not about technologies, not about innovations, but experiences that we go through and we live through. That's the wonderful word. So we use a different set of words there, right? We don't use cloud computing to express my experience. We use words like that, social networking, connecting with people, relationships, sharing photos, sharing memories, right? Those are the experiences that are coming from the human side, not coming from the technology side, it's not coming from engineering. So that's another way to look at it. So my focus and the Institute of Design's focus is this lens. Can you look at innovations with this lens about people and their experiences? We try to create innovations based on that. That's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of the presentation, and we'll talk about some high-level mindsets that all of us innovators need to have to take that perspective to create innovations. But the problem that the concern that I have when I keep talking to people, even highly accomplished companies, innovators or R&D departments, we're still struggling to practice innovation in a deliberate, intentional way. Right? It almost happens. Sometimes it happens in teams. Sometimes it happens around smart people. But there is no way in which I can practice in a disciplined, organized, structured, rigorous way. Right? So can we get to that? Innovation is still like an art, right? So can we take that art of innovating slightly towards a science to make it formalized so that all you and I can use that science in a deliberate way to come out with successful innovations? That's one question that we always try to ask, right? So we should be aware of that. And then this idea: why are innovations, anything that new that comes out in the marketplace, a new product or a service or a new experience, why they're risky and why they're uncertain? I'm not sure. When I put out something out in the market, I'm not sure how it'll be fostered by the public, by the people. I'm taking a risk, in fact, but I'm not sure whether it'll be successful. Right, but in fact, a study done by Dublin, part of Monitor Group and now part of Deloitte, they did some research on understanding the success of innovations. Out of 100 innovations, 96 fail. Right? In their study, 96% of innovations or new product introduction in the marketplace fail. Right? They don't sustain over a period of time. So that should be of concern to all of us. That itself, sort of tells us that we don't know really how to practice innovations for success, for repeatability, for deliberate success. So how can the thing that we address all the time is how can we raise that success rate from 4% to 4.5% or 5% or 6%? That itself is a big success, right? If we can deliberately do that. So our school, that's what we teach. That's the angle with which we teach our students, our graduate students and PhD students about coming out with innovations. How can we create successful innovations? For that, you need to go through regular, structured processes and very thoughtfully done work, right? So that's what I will cover in the next part of the presentation. So the question in front of me is how to make innovation a reliable practice, right? I'm kind of an action-oriented person. I like theories and frameworks and mental models. But ultimately, you have to do something with that. You have to act on it, right? So even in our courses, and our students are pretty good at taking action on ambiguous situations, right? They're pretty comfortable with ambiguity, dealing with ambiguity. And the term that we use is cutting cubes out of fog, right? The fog in front of you, I don't know where the innovation, where should I go? It's a foggy world in which I'm trying to innovate. Can you really cut some cubes out of that, right? Then you're making an effort to make successful innovations. So, Joe mentioned that I just published this book about 5 months ago. It's pretty useful. A lot of good feedback I'm getting that people are actually using it for their projects. So if you do a search on Amazon, you'll find a lot of reviews about that. But today, the first part of the session, today's session is in two parts. First part, I want to cover some fundamental ideas. I call it six principles that any innovator need to have. These principles, I almost think of them as mindset or mindset approaches. Any innovator should have or pay attention to make the innovation successful more than 4% to 4.5%. And then the next part of today's presentation, the second part, will be an actually interactive session, and we'll work on one or two very interesting methodologies that is talked about in the book. So let's go through these 6 important mindsets or principles. Integrate many drivers of innovation, right? Integrate many drivers of innovation. What does that mean? But even before getting into what it means, let's have a common understanding of what we mean by innovation. There is a word highly used, is a buzz around innovation. Everyone is talking about innovation, right? There's a buzz, there's a hype. But all of us somehow will have to have a common definition of what we mean by innovation. It might mean to you something, to a biologist something else, to a doctor something else, right? So some simple definition like that works for me and for my practical purpose. Innovation is a viable offering. Offering can be a product, a service, a website, an interface, an experience, an environment, a building. So it has to be an offering that is given to you by somebody, right? It has to be a viable offering, otherwise it's an invention, right? It has to be made practical in the real world. New, obviously, very understandable, to a specific context and time. Sometimes we forget that. Right? Innovations are good only in that context, in that time. Right? Innovations today may not be valid next week down the line. So we have to be cognizant of that dynamic nature of how we look at things that are innovations that are not. Right? That create user and provide a value. Ultimately, anything new put out in the marketplace is a viable offering, which is new to the context and time, has to produce some value to the end user as well as the provider. And it has to make profit, ultimately, ROI and things like that we use, right? So that definition is sort of simple definition, but it works for me, and for common understanding, it works pretty well. But now let us look at what do we mean the drivers of innovation. How do I integrate the drivers of innovation? This is a high-level model that we use. There are primarily 4 drivers. There's no rocket science. It is understandable, but I put it out as a framework to have a discussion around. There is a driver coming from here that is what is viable in the business, right? You do a business analytics, look at the marketplace. Oh, there's a gap in the marketplace. How do I create an innovation to fill that gap? Typically done by MBAs and executives in companies, financial analysts, right? Coming from that direction. That's a huge driver for innovation. Some innovations come from the technology side, right? So I invented this chip that can process information faster, cheaper. How do I apply this chip in a concept that I can sell? So that's the driver coming from the technology side. Billions of dollars are pumped into R&D departments. That's the focus. And the third driver is coming from the bottom. That is what is desirable for people, right? That's where I come from. The design approach comes from that. Start with people, looking at people. What are their needs? What are their unmet needs, unarticulated needs? What are the new behaviors that are evolving, new cultural work lifestyles that are evolving? How can I create innovation to support all that? So that's a different direction. And the fourth direction is something new that we have to pay attention to. What is sustainable in the environment and the society, right? So things like greenness and global warming kind of driven, those kinds of drivers we have to take care of. So what is key about these, looking at these drivers is that no single driver will create the most successful innovation, right? If you are an engineer fully focused on technology-based innovation only, chances that you will be in that 96%, right? If you're a business executive looking only at financial analytics and market opportunities, the chances that you'll be in the 96%. So our contention is that what you really need to make innovation successful is integration between all those four drivers. Get business analytics people, finance people, engineers, technologists, software engineers, usability experts, users, community representatives, social people who can represent the social context. Put all of them make all of them participate in the innovation process. It's a big challenge, but sort of conceptually it works. But you can make it work with some basic techniques. But design innovation in that respect is trying to do that. That is, we in our courses that we teach students, graduate students on design, we have courses that we have borrowed from business. We have courses that are taught by engineers. We have courses that are taught by environmental scientists. We try to bring experts from other fields into creating competencies for a designer. So that's the first. I think this is a good attempt to trying to integrate the many drivers. I'm not sure you can use this model to profile your own company. Where are you in relation to that? In relation to that model, in my case, I'm pretty big there at the design side. I do a little bit of business strategy work, very little technology work. Nowadays, I started putting a lot of emphasis on environmental-driven work. So that's my profile. So you could have your own profile based on what your background and competencies are. So that's how that model works. So that's one mindset. Always think about integrating other disciplines into your work to make your work successful. The second one, which is a soft one, delight the people who are going to use your innovation. Ultimately, someone is going to use your interface or software, whatever you put it out on the web page. Right? Someone is going to use it. Well, of course, you are highly well-recognized experts in usability studies, but the fundamental principle is how can I put a smile on the face or the person who's going to use whatever is given to that person, right? So that's the principle that you have to think about. Lots of examples of successful companies doing that. In my view, Apple is doing that pretty well, right? With their iPod and iPhone and iPad now. They're creating some kind of delight in the life of people. The other day I was talking to a friend of mine. She said that her grandmother never used to use any technology devices, no computer, nothing. But when iPad came out, she gave a gift to her grandmother, iPod, as a gift. And she in a few hours, a few days, she was pretty comfortable, right? Operating that, this zooming out is that, right? pretty comfortable with that, and then she got so attached to it, the obsessive connection to technology, that when she can't find the iPad, she goes nuts, right? Where is my iPad? My life is... So that's the kind of attachment people have. That's delight, right? You really created delightful experience in people's lives. Can you create that with your website, with your user interface? That's the question that you should be asking. Lots of examples. I do a lot of work, around the world, including India, where I originally come from. There is a company called Godrej. Some of you may have heard. It's a huge company, furniture, appliances, a whole lot of products. They were fascinated by this idea of design innovation. They're a typical engineering innovation company, creating appliances and furniture and other things. So they were thinking about India is a huge population, and 80% of the population live in rural situations. They don't live in cities. Only 20% of the population live in cities. So rural situations are really remote. Some of the rural places don't even have proper roads that are drivable. They're walking ways and things like that. So how can Godrej as a company make a difference in people's lives in rural situations? That is the question Godrej is asking, and I was helping them with this design methods and techniques that they adopted in their work. And one of the innovations that they came out with is called Chotu Cool. Chotu means small, small cool. So a small refrigerator that is affordable for poor people, even in rural villages. The challenges are big. How can you make a refrigerator that costs less than $40? Less than $40, not $1,000, right? So that people in rural villages can afford it. How can you distribute it? That's even a big challenge. Massive, non-accessible areas so they created this Chotu Cool, one of the most successful products that really put the smile on people, a whole lot of people. Suddenly, the village people in rural situations, the kids had a big smile on their face because they could have a Sprite that is really cool, right? So that made a difference. So that lots of examples like that you can find, but probably not that. Delighting doesn't mean that, right? A dentist, may take that approach, and that might only scare away people. So delight has specific meanings, right? The word that is critical there is empathy, right? Empathy. Empathy means putting yourself in the shoes of someone else, imagining yourself to be somebody else, really imagining yourself, not superficially. Can you do that? Some of the methodologies that we use in user research is that, really immersing ourselves into people's lives, right? I had a friend of mine who was an architect who studies a client's behavior by living with them for a few weeks, 1 or 2 weeks. He goes and lives with their family before he touches the drafting board or create a drawing of the. So that is really getting empathetic towards the people ultimately who's going to use your innovation, right? How can you do that? Some of the techniques that we use are based on that fundamental belief that innovation should feel like a gift from a knowing friend, right? When I'm buying a gift for my mother or grandmother, I'm really being empathic about what my grandmother will like or my grandmother will like. I'm really thinking hard, right? Anything that I give it, she doesn't like, that's not a good gift, right? So can you think about your innovation as a gift, right? Think about your end user as your mother or a grandmother, right in front of you. When you're putting out a web page with all the information, think about the user sitting right in front of you, right? Can that be equivalent to a gift that the person will receive wholeheartedly? So those are the kinds of mindset that is really needed to make innovation successful. So third principle, reframe, right? So integration of different drivers is good. Delighting end users is good. Those are all high-level things. Now let's get down to sort of practical levels of taking action on some of those. Reframe the current model behind innovation, right? Sometimes you may be familiar with words like thinking outside the box, right? Things like that. To think about weird ideas, right? Things like that is tending towards that. But I prefer the word reframe. Here's an example, old example, but still works as an illustration for a shoe company, for a shoe manufacturing company. The innovation model, the current innovation model, not current at that time, probably 15 years ago, the current model at that time was make a better shoe, make it much more comfortable, right? Make it easy to wear and less costly and things like that. That's the current model of creating a better shoe, right? So Nike came out with a different model, a reframe model. It's not about a better shoe. Can I really support the experience of that runner, right? Can I really support the experience of that runner? It's not about a better shoe. So that is the reframing that Nike took. A lot of us are taking that direction now. The old example, very successful. That is why Nike's shoes, when it came out, not only has better materials and better comfort that use the current model, but you can put sensors in the shoe, right? You could put a sensor, and when you're jogging, every step is being recorded into the iPod that you're listening to music, right? You have an iPod, and every step is recorded in the iPod, and it collects information about your running, right? You come back from running, come back home, plug your iPod into the laptop, and down goes all the information that is collected, and that goes into Nike website. Right? Nike website has really beautiful graphical visualizations of your data. You can see, curves or progress that you have made last month, last year. You can compare your progress among your friends. Oh, your profile looks like that, and my profile looks like that. I made better progress than you, and things like that. Or you can compare it with Olympic athletes, right? So from a better shoe, for Nike, the focus went to all those areas, sensor technologies, right? How to communicate with the iPod, how to create an engaging website, how to create visualization that people would value. So that's a great example of a reframe. So every time you come out with a problem in front of you, can you reframe it immediately? Right? It's very easy to solve a problem with a current frame, make improvements and make incremental innovations. But reframing leads to really disruptive and radical innovations. Another example, very quickly, MP3 player. When Apple came out with iPod, again, an old example, but still valid, still very powerful. When they came out with iPod about 15 years ago, there are a lot of devices like this, MP3 players, right? Apple could have taken the stance of, let's produce a better MP3 player, right? Could have taken the stance. But they said, oh, let's reframe it, right? That, of course, Steve Jobs is a mind. He's always reframing things, right? He's a wonderful leader that way. So that's how they reframed. It's not about a better MP3 player. Let us produce a product that'll add delight to the people listening to music experience. Let's create a product to support the entire music experience. That's how they produced the iPod when it came out. Really nice form that especially teenagers really like, with a lot of skin and pattern that you can overlay, different colors, nice interface, suddenly, the circular motion, right? Not only that, they had iTunes, the content that can make iPod really smart, right? It's a content-enabled product. So not just a product. So iTunes and iPod really worked very well. And they started selling it not in regular shops, Apple stores, where it's more like an interactive. You can go there and play around with this, right? Not the product stacked on shelves in regular retail. So those are all innovations, channel innovations, content innovations, or partnership innovation. Apple's competitors like HP or Bose were creating products to support Apple's products with the docks, right? The iPod dock. So that was an amazing way in which to think about an innovation that is very systemic, it works at a system level, and then really made a difference by reframing, right? So that's where we have to move from, the current model of making incremental innovations. Let's make functions and features better. Even we use in usability also, look at the website and look at how can we make the functionality of the information better, features better, But we have to go beyond that. Think about the entire experience. That's where we have to really study the life journeys and the people's overall experience, the perceptions, and the takeaway, the overall takeaway from the website, their motivation, their desires. Take a different stance on your on your innovation. Fourth one, broaden the context of innovation. That is, if you are focused on your innovation, whether you're a product innovator or a website or a service innovator, many a time we are so involved and so sort of dedicated to create innovation, we get into the trap of focus, right? Sometimes it is very difficult to take away from that focus and then take a broader look. So I always say that when you're too involved with your innovation work or design work, sometimes you take a step back. Forget about all the details, right? Forget about all the details and broaden your perspective and look at your innovation in relation to the whole system, right? In relation to the whole system, everything else around you, the context, other people manufacturing it, the environment, the regulation, the government, the policies, all has some effect on your innovation. So try to broaden that context. So we use a lot of tools to deliberately do that, frameworks like this. If you're a product designer trying to improve a product, take a step back and look at the activities that people do with the product and try to support that. I remember, I do a lot of client, consulting work for corporations. When I was working with Doblin, a strategy consulting firm, Texas Instruments approached us with a laptop at that time. That is 1995. Laptop was the cool thing at that time. Texas Instruments wanted to get into the laptop market. They approached us and said, can you redesign the laptop and make it really cool so that we can get into that business? So imagine a laptop right in the center. That is the offering. So what we said that, okay, that's a good idea, but we are not going to study the laptop. Our research will not look at laptop at all. We will look at, but as a secondary focus, we are going to look at the activities that people do with laptop. We called it mobility computing at that time. Laptops support mobility, right? What are the activities that people do when they move around dealing with information, right? Communicating, sending messages, and all kinds of activities, right? So if you study those activities, new opportunities emerge. It may not land up in a better laptop. It may land up in a completely different set of innovations like small mobile devices. That's exactly what we ultimately presented to Texas Instruments. They wanted a better redesigned laptop, but the broadening of the approach led to a series of new innovations. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. Because around 2000 time, everything went down, and Texas Instruments changed their strategy. Let's not get into the consumer market. Let's continue with our traditional business. So unfortunately, that didn't fly off. But nowadays, you can see the plethora of mobile devices out there. It's not laptop anymore, right? People, when they're mobile, they want to do different things differently, and different devices can support different activities differently, right? So that's the kind of reframing that we can do. We use other tools like the 10 types of innovations, right? That's a tool that I have developed when I was working again at Doblin. There are 10 types of innovations. Can you use that as a thinking tool? Think about your own innovations. In this example, what is shown here is the Chotu Cool, right? The Chotu Cool example that I mentioned, the small refrigerator in India. Of course, it's a product innovation. It really made a different new product. But a whole lot of other innovations it addressed. For example, the last image that you see, a lot of women there, right? What is it? It is the branding and the channel innovation built in was to support businesses, make women in villages entrepreneurial. So women became the distributors. Women, housewives in rural situations were empowered by Godrej to be the distributors. And they were selling this Chotukul in their own ways. They used to create their own advertisement. They will create street dramas In community, community spaces, Chotukul in the center, they will have a drama around it. Their own innovations to sell the idea or engage the community into the value of a cooling device like that. Such a powerful way in which Godrej made that happen. I was amazed by that. So Indian Post, you see a little figure, Indian Post, what does it mean, right? It's a channel innovation. The importance of that cannot be underestimated. India is a wide, as I mentioned, the rural areas are really inaccessible and no proper roads and things like that. But mail arrives. It has a fantastic postal system. If you mail something here to a remote rural village, it'll arrive somehow. It may take a little bit more time, but it'll reach there in time. Really great postal service system. Yes, 5 minutes, yeah. So, but that concept is going down because of email, right? Digital world. You don't need to really physically deliver a mail. The post offices that were there in rural areas where the mail was being delivered were becoming almost obsolete, right? There's no need for delivering mail anymore. So Godrej partnered with Indian postal system to repurpose those post offices as distribution centers for Chotukul. So post office became a retail space where women, families can go and buy a Chotukul, get it serviced, maintenance service and things like that. So the reach became really vast. That is how they made the innovation successful. So what I'm saying is that by thinking about these 10 types of innovation, you can really make your innovation much more successful in a systemic way. So I have to sort of run through, I'm running out of time, but the fifth principle is foster an innovation culture in organization. Always we should, as innovators, we should think about how can my work affect my peers? How can my work influence the general innovation culture in the organization that everyone is thinking about innovation every time, including the accountant? I should think about what can be done to make the accounting process better. So innovation is not a prerogative of a designer or a innovator, but it should become pervasive. So that's the idea here. How can we have that mindset of fostering an innovation culture in organizations? So if you have the question of what is next, different people have different opinions about what should be the next innovation, right? Engineers, anthropologists, including and customers and family members, and everyone should participate in that innovation process. So the challenge is how to create a shared space where everyone can participate, right? Lots of things that you can do. That's the biggest challenge I'm finding in an organization, to create that cultural change. But things like this, simple things like this work. Empower a champion in an organization. That has worked. That is a model that has worked out very well. Champions in an organization can make a big difference. So champions who take on the role of innovation facilitation. Right? Procter & Gamble, for example, 15 years ago, I worked with them a lot. 15 years ago, they were working in silos. Hair care division will never talk to skincare division and fabric care division. Siloed model, right? Suddenly, Claudia Kochka was a champion, amazing woman with a lot of enthusiasm, a champion. She decided to create an innovation culture within that with buy-in from A.G. Lafley, who was the then CEO, who supported that idea and really made a difference in the culture of the organization. Through things like this, workshops, inspired collaborative workshops, in which all stakeholders are brought in on a weekly basis or very frequently. All the stakeholders are brought in to discuss what can work and what cannot work. Brainstorming sessions with all these people contributing. So those are simple steps that you can take, but even things like that also happening culturally. Like, have you heard the word hacker spaces, right? Hacker spaces are people with the mentality of hacking in a good sense, right? People with the mentality of really drilling down into software, collecting together as a community, trying to create new things, right? They are called maker spaces now, right? A community of people having similar interests, trying to do new things, right? Open innovation. another concept which is becoming very popular these days, which is how can everyone participate in the innovation process, right? Innovation need not be by you and me. Anyone around the world should be able to participate in that. Nowadays, crowdsourcing, our technology allows that, right? So some companies are actually practicing it, like Procter & Gamble has a system called Connect and Develop. You can go to their website. If you have an idea for a household product, you can put your idea, and then it becomes part of Procter & Gamble's pool of growing ideas. And so if your idea finally gets embodied in a final product, you will get some incentive. There's a royalty program that they have worked out. So there's incentive-based involvement of the entire population. Someone from Taiwan or Vietnam can participate in the innovation process of Procter & Gamble. So that's the direction in which our world is going. Even on a virtual site, you can create things like that. Spotify, music, right? You can share music. You can look at your friends' preferences in music. Become much more interesting, right? LinkedIn is a virtual environment where you're actually creating a shared space to exchange ideas and at a professional level. So can you create innovation spaces? Innovation space where innovations could be created in the same way by involving everyone in discussions. They can put their own methods, their own approaches, and things like that, and go on like that. So that's just one example. And lastly, to hurry a little bit there, practice innovation in a discipline, with a disciplined process and a rigorous set of methods. My book is all about that, 101 methods. Sometimes you get intimidated. Oh, 101 methods, how am I going to use all those? But it's not a matter of using 101. Use only 5 or 10 of those, but effectively. Use the best method that works best for you, right? But that doesn't mean that rigor doesn't mean that you kill yourself, right? You should have fun. That these are our students working so, on a day-to-day basis. So the process model is something like that. Real, abstract, understand, make. 2 scales there. There are 7 modes in the process that the very generic process, nothing really rocket science about it. I think you and I might be practicing it, but I formalized it. Early on, innovation process is sensing intent. Even before innovating what you want to innovate, you ask yourself, what should I innovate? Where the trends? What are the trends that are going on in the world? Where the world is moving? Am I aware of all that to move in that direction? That's the initial sensing intent. Once you have a rough direction and establish where you want to move, then you have to really understand the reality. You have to know the people, and that's where you have to start with research, user context research, understanding the reality. And then once you have understood reality, you can move up on the scale from real to abstract. That's where you spend a lot of time in abstract terms trying to make sense out of what does the data tell me? What are usability studies, the results from usability studies tell me? What are the patterns that I can see? You have to be in that abstract world, analyzing and framing and reframing. And then once you have good reframes, then you can move to the make side, exploring concepts. That's where brainstorming happens. You might explore hundreds of ideas, but hundreds of ideas by themselves don't mean anything until you frame solutions. Out of those 100 ideas, you might have to create the right combinations of ideas that are viable. That's when you take judgments and testing and prototypes and things like that to make it viable in the marketplace. And finally, you go down and realize that through prototypes and pilots, and finally launch it, realize the offering. So that's a very typical, very generic process that can be applied to any innovation process, whether it is website design, product design, service design, experience design, or any kind of design. And the process is not linear in the actual project. You might be jumping back and forth and iterative, right? You first make a prototype, test it many times, and then you pilot it in the real market, test it many times. So it is iterative and non-linear. So we have to be aware of that. But it is convenient to put the process in a linear way so that I can organize my toolkit, right? 101 of those, which are discussed in the book in somewhat detail, that you can use your own, right? Are you counting? Okay. There are 101. It's not the toolkit that really matters, how you use the toolkit, right? As I said, you don't have to use 101. It can be intimidating that way. But the right kind of, once you are aware of all these tools, how they roughly work, then you know, depending upon the project, which one to select, tailor it to projects. Small project, you might select only 3 or 4 tools. In a system design project that might go for years, you might select 20 tools out of that, right? So that's the trick that you have to. So I'll finish with this thought, challenge yourself. I've introduced these 6 mindsets and principles. Deliberately challenge yourself in your own work to bring some of these into your thinking. You can make a big difference. Thanks a lot.